So if you're looking to add a little bit more drama to your boudoir photography, I would obviously kind of encourage you to explore a darker side of boudoir. You often see quite a lot of my images where they're perhaps based on the white sheet and they're light and bright and so on with it. Even some of the French boudoir kind of ideas that we've shot with are usually light and bright. But low key definitely brings more of a dramatic feel, and it's kind of what the butler sees, kind of as if they were kind of poking through, looking through the keyhole, as it were. And all we've really got to do is understand to either minimize the tones within the actual scene, so they're a darker tone rather than a lighter tone, or minimize the lighting. Those two key things will dramatically change the image. So even if you've got a high key setup or a very bright and light setup, you can instantly change that by changing the reflector, changing the softbox, or simply changing the position of the lighting. So let's have a look at a few images to actually demonstrate that. So first of all, looking at the set. Now you've seen this set before, but it's been in a higher key, a lighter and brighter white, yes? So when we talk about low key, this is in the darker tones of grey. A higher key is in the lighter tones of grey, so from grey to white or from grey to black for low key. So all we've done here is thrown a background kind of sheets, dark black ones across the covering of the bed and obviously with the pillows, and instantly that has changed the drama. The bed head though is still kind of white and bright and light, so that's going to kind of have a bit of a contrast in the scene. But the light source, like you can see here, the big window light, and behind that is the big softbox, of course. But we're kind of cutting down the amount of light by just actually putting the curtains, the backgrounds, to hide most of that light or to diffuse it anyway. So by the time we've kind of moved camera position and the light is now at the 3 o'clock position, we're pretty much going to get drama. But you're going to see here, even if I expose perfectly for the middle of the bed, this bed head is still going to be bright and white and light. So, you know, if you are going to kind of really go down the lower key, think about getting some netting to actually go over the bed head, go over the foot of the bed as well, to actually bring the drama down, or try and avoid from any light spilling onto the bed itself. So the key thing for me is small or narrow lighting, and by doing that alone, and by positioning it between the 9 o'clock position and the 3 o'clock position, so in that clockwise rotation, you will instantly create drama within your image. So the first image that we saw on screen is using the likes of a strip box or a very small reflector dish that could be controlled its light with the likes of barn doors, so it's kind of minimizing the spill. Now you can see how little light is in the scene because in the background we've got a room lamp. And as a rule of thumb, if we were on 100 ISO and we were basically shooting around about f4, that is going to record anywhere between a 15th and a 60th of a second. Now, because I'm usually shooting on 125th of a second, and I'm usually shooting between f4 and 2.8, you can see the brightness and the lightness that is in the background. But you can see the control of the light. So in other words, the main light source that's spilling onto Mila here is basically being controlled so it doesn't spill on the rest of the scene. That also includes the bed, minimizing where the light can go. Now remember, you know, if you don't have kind of barn doors yourself, you can kind of cut up some black card, stick it on with some gaffer tape to actually kind of create the shape. You can even create a tighter, smaller, narrower light source by taping that same card onto the front of your reflector dish and so on to control the light, kind of the way it spills. Naturally, all light wants to spread itself. So as it comes out of a softbox, umbrella, reflector, whatever it would be, even a window, its job is to try and kind of scatter. So if we want to control the light, we need to actually kind of control the aperture of the light that it's allowed to spill through. So the smaller the light source, the more dramatic the image. Now here as a rule, even though Mila's looking at me, I'd usually do this shot where she's actually looking down to the likes of her knees or just off to what I would say is the 4 o'clock position. And by doing that, it will actually give me a beautiful light onto the face. because she's looking at camera position, it's almost like she's been caught, or I've been caught. There's no light within the eyes, so it's going to be a really bad quality of portrait. However, if she was looking down, the indirectness will allow the mistake of the light. But in fact, if she repositioned the nose to look down to the 4 o'clock position, it would solve pretty much all of the quality of the light issues anyway. As a rule, if you're going to light the face specifically because you want to see the face, you should think about to light the 5 planes of the face. That is the forehead, the chin, and the 2 cheeks and the nose. Okay, as it is here, all we've really lit is the nose, and if you only light the likes of a nose, it's going to exaggerate its size as well, which is never going to be complementary. But remember, today we're talking about the lower key kind of images. So I've got some behind the scenes shot here of 2 images, one of Kelsey on the bed, one with the kind of the window light, which is still a big softbox behind there. And you can see over here, we've got a beauty dish with a grid on. So in other words, this image is being lit by both of the lights. But if we were to shoot with the actual the beauty dish with a grid on, you can see the drama of the lighting immediately change there. So you can still see that the modeling lamps though are still on in the flash heads that are in the softbox, but in fact the exposure is exactly the same as the last image, like we saw here, except now because there's no real fill going on within the image, it's only the hard light that we see, of course, and things really. So, you know, if in doubt, switch one of your lights off and you should actually make a drastic difference to the image anyway. But with having this light at the 2 o'clock position, the 1 o'clock position, you're always going to get more drama within your photograph. So if you're looking to do some edgy kind of 50 shades images and so on with it, then the light from the kind of behind your subject is going to create the drama that you need. And I would say that is the secret to lower key style of boudoir photography, is to try and always have the light behind the subject in some way. So if you imagine the table line kind of being extended right across the composition here, basically that studio flash, that is that honeycomb with the grid on that we're seeing there at the 2 o'clock position, can never come close to the edge of the table, because if we do, it's going to start to first of all split light, but then it will actually start to add lighting onto the front of the scene. So more drama is going to be created by the light from behind. There are exceptions, and one of them is when you're using a very, very high light source. And by doing that, you can also minimize the depth of shadow within the image. So in other words, when you're lifting the chin up a little bit, because the light is high, the rest of the body in the scene that the flash is being allowed to hit, or LEDs or whatever you're using, basically by the time it gets there and bounces back, the main exposure obviously was taken here for the face. So in other words, everything else within the scene is naturally going to be a stop or 2 stops darker no matter what, unless you introduce the likes of a reflector. So if you're having your light up high, you can actually change the direction. So whereas we talked about the lighting from the 9 o'clock position going in a kind of a clockwise position around to the 3 o'clock, that's going to create us the drama. The real drama of light when it's at the front, in fact, is when it's either going to be very, very high or very, very low. Very low will create you a horror light. A very high light will basically almost minimize all light within the eyes. But really what it's also doing, as I explained, is minimizing the amount of skin that is being touched by that same exposure light, because you're raising up the head perhaps and so on with it. So even within a very fleshy image, like all boudoir photography tends to be, we can still control the light in its size, in its shape, and obviously from its position. So even here, when we've got that strip box coming in from the right hand side, we've got a client with light and bright clothing on. We've got skin that is reflecting light. We've got pants that are reflecting light. So theoretically, this is not a low key image, but it is, because what we're doing is minimizing the tonality in the highlight and the white. Obviously, to make this a true low key image, what she has on would need to be in a darker tone. So in other words, instead of the white furry jacket, it would be more of a pinky one perhaps, and that would obviously then initially be at least a stop darker in the image. Instead of the white pants, we would actually have black pants, and by doing that the laundry choice will dramatically change as well. But otherwise, kind of minimizing where the light falls is absolutely key, and narrowing that light down. And I would definitely encourage you to play around with reflector grids, honeycomb grids, and the likes of barn doors as well, because you can have some great fun and get some great results from that as well. So when we've got that light coming in from behind, when it touches flesh, it naturally reflects, and your eye will be drawn to the actual brightest points within the image. So if we had controlled the lighting onto her with a smaller light source like a honeycomb or with barn doors, all the kind of the hip light would have been disappeared, and then what we would have had is a very dark, low-key image with just actually the lighting actually onto the face. Now, of course, if you've got this much light hit in the flesh because you can't control it, whatever it would be, then obviously don't be afraid to actually go into the likes of RAW and kind of minimize that light, the lighting down by darkening down the whole scene. So in other words, if we were to just kind of bring it into RAW, we can do one of two things. We can take the overall light of the exposure and bring it down, and we can bring down the highlights, and we can bring down the whites and so on with it. Yes, in the overall effect. Then we could go into the likes of the mask, pick up the brush, start to paint in the areas that we want the main light to kind of start to touch and so on with it. And then we can start to bring back some of the exposure within the image as well, so we can control the light in the post-production. What I would suggest though is that you basically have some light to touch the flesh and it just doesn't look grey. So in other words, just gently stroke it as if almost dappled light has fallen onto your subject. Yep. And then just go in and kind of bring up that exposure just a little bit. But you can see now the difference in the before and after of the image is one that, even though perfectly exposed, there's too much brightness to the image. But by going into the post-production, we can kind of control that lighting down. So in other words, it's never too late to actually make the difference to your image, but it's better to try and achieve it in the likes of the photographic stages rather than all in the post-production. So in exactly the same way here, you would go in and paint it. Even though we've got half a set in pure black, we've got half a set with detail in the whites, we can still go in and actually change all the look and the feel to do with this in the actual RAW process in itself. Of course, any light coming in from high and from the likes of the 9 to the 3 o'clock position, you'll obviously kind of really change the look and the feel. If you want more drama, put the light behind the subject, minimize the light spilling onto them. And if you want to bring a little bit more detail back, like you can see in this image on the face, you can obviously just open up your working aperture at that point without actually changing any of the exposure of the flash and so on. But if we're going for a silhouette, remember you're really trying to get the subject further away from your background, and if possible use the likes of netting if you're using on a white wall to give you more of that room set idea. But it also knocks back the likes of the detail on the white of a white wall and so on. Saying that though, it can look very, very dynamic if you've got a pure white wall and nothing is reflecting onto the subject and you've got that pure silhouette as well. But when you're working in small spaces, remember, you know, like I said right at the beginning, light is trying to kind of escape and kind of bounce all over the place and so on with it. So you need to obviously minimize where that light is going to. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of quick glimpse into low key for your boudoir photography, and the key points are to make sure that you're using smaller light sources rather than big light sources. Make sure the light is coming in from the 9 o'clock position around to the 3 o'clock position in a clockwise direction to keep more dynamic. And then obviously using the likes of strip boxes or snoots or small reflect dishes with honeycombs on to control your light spill. Good luck, have fun.